everybody. I'm Scott Emergut from Ricochet.com. We're here with two of my favorite people. Jack Fowler, the former publisher of National Review, and Victor Davis Hanson, who I produced a podcast with, or for about 7 years with Troy Senik. And that I don't get to do that anymore is one of the great disappointments of my career, which I have said to Victor many times, cried to him and to Mrs.
I can
Hanson.
see the tears coming down your eyes.
That's right. Just two quick stories. Jack Fowler, this discussion may not be taking place if it wasn't for Jack Fowler. In the early days of Ricochet, Jack Fowler let us put our fledgling podcast on National Review. He also gave us access to a lot of National Review talent selflessly. And it made a huge difference to us in those early days. It got the ball rolling on the thing and gave us a legitimacy that we didn't really have. And all of us, Peter and Rob and I, will always be eternally grateful for that. As I mentioned, Victor and I did a podcast for 7 years. And there's one story that I always think about. I told this to Victor the last time I saw him, which was last fall. The day that Trump came down the escalator, we were doing a podcast about something else. I don't even remember what the topic was now, but it wasn't about Trump. And the thing that I missed most about doing the podcast was that I got to hang out with Victor for 20 or 30 minutes before and after the podcast. And Troy and Victor and I just gabbed. And I mentioned, did you see Trump declared today? And Victor, we were just joking around. And then Victor got very serious and said, he can win. And I'll tell you something else. If he runs against Hillary, he said he can win the nomination. And if he runs against Hillary Clinton, he can win. And I, of course, thought that was just ridiculous. I said, it's Donald Trump. Well, that was the last time I did not take Victor's words seriously. And he's been gentlemanly enough only to tease me about it occasionally.
I've been very good about that.
You have been.
I had I had my first and last podcast with Never Trump Mona Charon and Jay Nordlinger, and that's right. That was with me too. Lively. That if you've never heard, we recorded that podcast on the day of Trump's inauguration in 2017, and if you've never heard that podcast, well, we can repost it. It's quite a time capsule. I played by the Marquess of Queensberry rules. I'm not sure my interlocutors did. You kept your cool better than the other participants, and it wasn't just Mona and Jay either. I won't name names, but everybody who listens to the Ricochet podcast can probably figure out who I'm talking about. Yeah. All right, enough about me, and so I'm going to actually turn my camera off, and we're going to start taking questions. And I will, if you open the Q&A panel there,
I have it open.
Okay, yeah. Good. So you see the first question there. I'm going to turn my video off and take it away, gentlemen.
Well, thanks very much, Scott and Brian and Alex, my dear friend Victor, with whom I record a few podcasts every week, and I've been doing that for a couple of years. And if it's any consolation, Scott, in the offices that I am in right now in Milford, Connecticut, these same offices used to be a temporary home for Troy Senik. So,
yes,
and Troy lived in Milford, and he's writing a book that's coming out later this year. It's a biography of Grover Cleveland.
Yes, he refuses to use my title, my suggestion for the title, which is "Hello, Cleveland." He won't. He just refuses to use it. I don't.
Maybe Drew Carey can write the foreword. Well, I thought today is an auspicious day to have this conversation and people asking Victor questions. It is the Ides of March, and I was going to recite something from Caesar, but I think I'll just leave that aside because Victor would correct my Latin pronunciation, despite me having 3 years of it in high school. And Victor, before we get to the questions of Ricochet's donors and friends and participants, I would like to ask you about Caesar. He was a general. you're a military historian.
Yes.
A classicist. He's the nexus of those two things. Victor, as a general, what was Caesar's greatest moment as a strategist, as a military mind? What was his greatest moment?
Well, he was Celertas Caesaris was his, and that was what Napoleon learned from him. He was quick, so when he got to a battlefield, he never hesitated when he saw an opening. I guess his best, he had a very tough time at Mundo. That was the Sons of Pompey, the last battle. And he was, in his 50s. And remember, when he eliminated Pompey, then he had to start all over again with the conspirators at Dyrrhachium and Pharsalus. And then when he got rid of them, he had the Sons of Pompey at Thapsus and Munda. So there were 3 iterations. And remember, there's going to be more after his death with Caesar and Antony, and then Augustus and Antony against the conspirators, and then they're going to break apart and fight them. So the whole thing is going to go on for over 20 years. But I think the most impressive is his quickness. Right after he crossed the Rubicon in about a year and a half, he had to go put down a revolt, because what happened once the head of the Roman snake was decapitated, there wasn't anybody in control, or the Senate no longer, and the 2 consuls were in control after he crossed the Rubicon. Everybody got into the picture. And so the Greeks of the state of Pontus under Mithridates revolted, and just like Alexander the Great, and everybody thought it would take months to get up there, and he got there within days. And he had that and he put it down with almost no losses. Winnie, witty, wiki, I came, I saw, right. I conquered. And and then the other long-term development was kind of barbaric, but he was flat broke, and he was a provincial. He got 4 legions, among them the famous 10th Legion, and he went into Gaul in 59. And when he came back out and crossed the Rubicon into Italy, according to Plutarch, he'd enslaved over 1 million people, but he was fabulously wealthy. He had the imperial revenues. He tapped those under the first triumvirate, and then they renewed it in 55. So one man took what is today Belgium, France, parts of the Netherlands, and he conquered the entire area and incorporated it into the Roman Empire. So I guess his trademark was also Clementia Caesaris. That's on his coins, the clemency of Caesar, that he didn't really execute all that many people that were rebellious against him, but quickness. And his greatest battles in Spain, he had a very talented subordinate, Labienus. He's sort of the subtext hero in the Gallic Wars. We have 8 books of the Gallic Wars. I don't know if Perseus wrote the last 8th book, but when you read the Gallic Wars, it's very funny, because if you look at classical Latin prose, it's much better and more, it's much easier to read, but it's also got a flow to it that very accomplished stylists like the master of Latin, Cicero, really don't have, or Sallust or Tacitus or Livy. So he was just a Renaissance person.
Gallia est omnis divisa in partes tres. I'm sure I mispronounced that. Speaking of pronunciation, Victor, and I hear you're a weenie guy as opposed to a weenie.
Yes.
Julia has a question. My New Testament Greek professor in high school always pronounced Caesar as Kaiser. Mm-hmm. Is that actually the correct pronunciation?
Yes, there's no differentiation in a hard and a soft C in Latin. So all of the initial C's are pronounced like K's. And we get that, that word comes in both pronunciations in later Western languages. And it's Tsar in Russian, but it comes on as Kaiser in Germany, rather than soft C. The other question, though, it's a big debate, and that is, when you have a foreign word, do you, when you transliterate it, or do you pronounce it according to your rules of pronunciation, or do you use the original and sound either more authentic or more pretentious?
Right.
So you can say Kaiser. Nobody says today Julius Caesar.
Right.
But remember Obama did that a lot. What was the word? Taliban? We're going to have the Taliban.
Well, that was some Harry Belafonte influence there.
Well, a banana boat song or a Taliban in Pakistan. Pakistan.
If we're going to have original pronunciation, we should just call ourselves then the United States of Amerigo, because we're named after Amerigo Vespucci.
I know. I knew you were going to get either the Italian or the Irish line.
Well, St. Patrick was born in Italy, so I have both. Julia again mentions like Kiev is pronounced Kiev by some people.
Now it is.
Yeah. So Victor, let's see some of the other questions. This is a little fan worshiping, I think. Phil, if this is wrong, me putting it as fan worship, you'll forgive me, but he writes, if some hypothetical future, quote unquote, sane president wants you, Victor, to be national security advisor or similar role, do you accept? Would you, and beyond that, would you accept being an ambassador or anything like that? What are your thoughts?
What was that? What movie did Clint Eastwood say? Was that in Dirty Harry? A man's got to know his limitations. Mm-hmm. I think it's one of the Dirty Harry movies. I mean, I'll give you an example why I wouldn't accept. A couple of times I wrote some articles, and you were the publisher of National Review, and Dick Cheney kind of quoted them, and then he read Carnage and Culture, and he gave a press conference and he held the book up. That happens once in a while. And the next day, the Washington Post wrote an article. It says Cheney, I'm not quoting verbatim, but it was basically Cheney reduced to quoting Selma Raisin Farmer from Fresno State. And it was a way of attacking him that he had no expertise. So my point is that
broke Raisin Farmer.
Yeah, broke. So I'm very happy with my life, and I really admire people who do undertake public service because it's a thankless job, but I know I'm not cut out for it. And I've been looking at, as you get older, you look at your career. When I was in high school, I sort of was outspoken. When I got to UC Santa Cruz, I was always a contrarian. I was outspoken. When I went to Stanford Graduate School in classics, I was always outspoken. I wasn't when I lived in Greece, so Cal State. So I don't have the temperament for it. I mean, I don't get angry very often, but I don't know. It's just,
you have had two appointments, haven't you? You were on the presidential 1776 commission.
That was an aborted, I can't use that word, but I mean, that was a abbreviated appointment because remember, it's no sooner appointed
the first thing he did.
Election.
Right.
But Obama did the same thing. I was a member of the American Battlefield Monument Commission, which I really liked.
Right.
And I was a good deal for them in the sense that I had, whenever I went to Europe, I would stop into one of the as a board member, one of the cemeteries. I never billed the government. But we were fired the day that Obama was in the transition. Then I think that my position was left open for over a year.
Yeah, that's kind of cheesy for them to do. By the way, Rich,
I just want to interrupt for 1 second. The movie was Magnum Force, which is a Dirty Harry movie. So
thank you.
Yeah. Okay. That was from Richard. I
know my limitations.
Yeah. Back on pronunciation, then we'll get into some other things. How do you? This is from James. How do you pronounce the Greek diphthong EU? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah. EU. Well. That's a funny thing because when Sir Thomas More wrote Utopia?
Yes.
He kind of played it. Right. Yeah. Ooh is no, and ooh is beautiful.
Right.
Good. So everybody thought utopia is a utopia. And it's kind of a trick question among classicists. Oh, utopia, does that mean a nice place or no place? Meaning ooh. It means no place. It's from the negative oo, Omicron, upsilon. But Thomas More himself deliberately picked that prefix so he could create ambiguity.
Okay. So I see a question from George, and I know George. George has been on cruises. Hey, George. George asks, your new platform, Blade of Perseus, which is, I'll say it's a title of Hanson.com.
Yeah.
Blade has become more strident in taking on the pillars of the left.
Yeah.
Are you finding this position reducing your contacts with your professional spheres? Is it taking a toll on your GI track or close relations? This from a concerned follower.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All I would say is, I'm not crazy, and you're not crazy, and Jack is not crazy. There is a world out there that really does believe that January 6th was one of the greatest insurrections in history, and the people should be locked away for good, even though Mr. Matthew Rosenberg, the New York Times, investigative reporter who wrote a series of devastating takedowns of January 6th and said it was a insurrection. He was honey trapped by Operation Veritas, and in it he just bubbled away about what a farce it was, that these guys were kind of buffoonish. There were more FBI people there than anybody. And the long and the short of it is, he thought it was not much to do about nothing in private. Same way as Molly Fast wrote about time, and all people on the conservative side said, well, we have 102 million mail-in ballots. Something's going wrong in the election. I'm not talking about, Donald Trump's visions of computers on their own talking to each other, any of that stuff. Just that when you have 102 or 4 million mail-in and early ballots, and it's almost more than double of 2016 and 5 times more than usual. And the error rate drops by a magnitude of 10 in most states, from 4 to 5% rejections down to 0.3 to 0.5. It's not very encouraging. And then you learn that a left-wing person says that after the election. It was a conspiracy, she says. And if you thought Antifa and BLM sort of disappeared before the election to suggest that Joe Biden was not a representative of violence in the street, you're right. She says that they controlled or they modulated the street demonstrations. If you thought it was kind of odd that all these CEOs started coming out and blasting Trump, and then she says that was not odd, and then she goes into all the money and phone calls that were used to change the voting laws through lawsuits, etc. So there you go again. If you thought, wow, I'm a conspiracy theorist because I think Donald Trump was right, that his wires were tapped, then sure enough, we get Mr. Durham's request for information, and we hear these Georgia techies are now on record saying, when Sussman asked me to monitor the private confidential data of the president of the United States, I didn't really find anything there in two-way fashion. It was maybe, I don't know, some Russian banks send out an ad everywhere and they just pinged it. There was nothing there. And so what I'm getting at is that in all of these so-called crazy right-wing angry moments where we feel that there's an administrative state or that these people feel they're above the law, they are, and they will eventually admit it in their arrogance and hubris. And I think that means what I'm trying to get at is that it gets very frustrating to see these people who are so sober and judicious, and they have all these degrees and they have all this temperament. And I work with, I'm on the Stanford campus, and then I'm here in Selma, and it's schizophrenic. And what I mean by that is that I don't see for all the educational certificates, degrees, heirs, that I had a colleague, I won't mention his name, that tweeted out, or he said them on MSNBC, that Germany never killed Germans. Hitler never killed Germans. The first people Hitler killed were Germans. And I mean, Dachau started out as a German place for German, whether they were German, not just German Jews, but German gays and German commies and German, mentally retarded. And then there was the other statement where he dug down. And he said, at least he didn't use chemical weapons on his own people. And I don't know what Zygon G is other than a chemical weapon. I don't know how many German citizens German-speaking people were sent to Auschwitz that were in the Sudetenland or the Alsace-Lorraine or Germany proper who were Jewish, probably somewhere about 250,000 or up that were German speakers that were gassed with a chemical weapon. So my point is that I think we've come to the end of the great 50-year experiment that we were all going to pour money into universities and post BA education was going to save us all. We're going to be the best and the brightest. It was a complete failure that left us $1.7 trillion in debt. It delayed marriage, it delayed child rearing, it delayed house purchases for a prolonged adolescent generation. And I feel that we all have a responsibility to speak out about these people and to pay no attention to all of the certificates and credentials they produce to make their arguments from authority rather than reason.
Well, let's here's a question from Dana. Let's assume the reverse of what's likely to happen in November. Let's say there's a Republican wipeout and there's total control. So here's Dana's question. I put it in that context. What do you think is the long-term goal of the progressives or the Democratic Socialists, which let's say the Democrats? One party, a one-party authoritarian state run by a Politburo and a privileged aristocracy. They get it all. Can you
Pretty
imagine?
Much. That's Dana's got a very good formulation because he's got progressive, one-party, authoritarian, Politburo, and privileged aristocracy. And when you look at how these things end up, whether it's in the Soviet Union or communist China or Cuba or any of these socialists, or North Korea, or even parts of Europe. I used to have a friend in Greece, and every time he knew he was Greek, and every time we would get on a bus with the archaeological students, we'd go to buy some big villa, whether it was at Sunion or out on Mount Hymettus on the other side toward the Europe. And he'd say, there is the home of the biggest socialist in Greece. And what he was saying is that they feel they're exempt from the consequences of their ideology. So yeah, I think that the left feels that they're so morally superior to everybody, and they're so intermarried, and they're in the right zip codes. If you just give them power, they know how to adjudicate and make things very good. That this $7.06 today, that changed, Jack, when we talked last, it was $6.10.
Right.
Things do change in 24, 48 hours.
Right.
And they feel that's good because the deplorables then will learn the wages of their carbon vomiting. And they, in Menlo Park in their Teslas, they have their 2-mile drive down to a cappuccino bar. They feel really good about it.
Yeah.
Why can't everybody learn to do what they did?
Speaking of being authoritarian, here's a question from Richard Easton, who asks, what should the Republicans do about the treatment of the January 6th defendants? And he says, greetings from a friend of Milt Rosenberg.
Oh, Milton Rosenberg was a wonderful man. I really liked him. He used to call me all the time, even when we didn't go on the radio. I liked him a lot. What should we do? There's the short answer, and then there's the long answer. The short one is when the Republicans will take the House and the Senate, but it matters more in the House, and they'll have an investigatory committee, and they will reopen the House Investigatory Committee, and they will ask questions that this committee Liz Cheney is on won't ask. And otherwise, we know what they are, Jack. There are, why was Ashley Babbitt's shooter never interrogated in person by the Capitol investigators? What are the communications between the speaker governing the level of force required when there was going to be a large demonstration? Can we look at the 14,000 purported hours? Why were some people held in solitary confinement without being charged? And there's going to be a lot of those. How many FBI informants were there? I don't know the answers to any of them, but when the parties change, they'll be. Longer term, it opens a better question, and that is,
since we often talk in religious terms, Jack, are we people of the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, or are we people of Sermon on the Mount?
Right.
And turn the other cheek. So when they come in there, do they need to tell the Democrats, this is what you people do, and you don't listen? So now we have the Senate and the House, and we're going to impeach Joe Biden because now we're the opposition party, and this is his first term, and we're doing exactly what the founders did not want us to do, but what you did, and you will never learn never to do it again, unless we say to Joe Biden, you violated the oath of your office. You did not enforce a federal immigration law. You broke every one of them for political purposes. Da-da. And will they investigate Hunter Biden? Will they get the IRS to look at Joe Biden to see if he reported Mr. 10%? Will they go in and say, you know what? You wanted to change the filibuster, add 4 states. You wanted to pack the court. Let's just put another 6 justices on the court. Yeah. We'll do that in 2024 and see how you like that. Or do you go this sort of Marquis of Queensberry rules? Well, we don't want to ever have that episode again in American history where the Democrats just go full punitive on us. So we're going to treat their hysteria and their obsession and their 2 impeachments, one of which was against the trial took place when Donald Trump was not even president. Neither one of them had a special investigator. Robert Mueller was not an impeachment investigator. They didn't file an impeachment report. They had no cross-examination. They had no witnesses. Right. Do they just say, we never want to do that, or we got to do it one time so you see how humiliating and dangerous it is? I don't have the answer for that, Jack.
Victor, it's 2024, and Republicans control everything. And President DeSantis. Well, what do you think about President DeSantis running for? And look at that as Donald, because you can't consider that without Donald Trump in an equation. But Donald Trump decides he doesn't want to run.
Oh, he doesn't want to run.
No, if he doesn't, I'm not. This is not Mike's question. Can we get Victor's take on DeSantis running for president in 2024? And I thank you for that, Mike. And I think it should be okay. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens either with or without Trump. So
well, for Trump I think will run, and then that's what we call Enrique Mende on the one hand, on the other hand. But what I'm getting at is for Trump to lose a nomination, you need about 3 kamikazes. And these are, I think Mike Pence is starting to play that role. I don't think he feels that he has a viable shot, but I think the shot that he's taken at Trump about Putin, except he's kind of the Chris Christie of 2016. Remember Chris Christie? That was trying to bring down and wound Donald Trump and to get in the teeth. Now, everybody who did that in the primary didn't turn out well, but maybe there will be people on the Republican side that say we'll bring up his tax records, or we'll find some dirt, or we'll go after him and weaken him. So then there'll be another candidate, and then people like I being the guy who takes him out, will be rewarded with a cabinet post or something. So that's how Trump could lose. The other problem, he's going to be 79, and Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Clyburn are not advertisements for our golden years politicians. Nancy Pelosi in many ways is scarier than Joe Biden at 81, I think she is. Dianne Feinstein is 89. So when you get up, before we thought, no problem, but I think, so we'll see. That's going to be an issue. The other thing is, can you have sunshine without sun? I mean, Donald Trump created the MAGA agenda. It looks to me that DeSantis is his most loyal adherent to it. Right. He's tough on China. He's tough on the border. He wants to make it a workers' people's middle-class party. He's against all this crazy critical race theory. He welcomes fisticuffs with the left. And the only missing piece in that picture is, does he have the ability to go out, or does he need the ability to get 50,000 people on a Friday night in Dakar,
Right.
I don't know. He doesn't have the charisma as Trump does. On the other hand, he doesn't go down blind alleys or cul-de-sacs like Trump, get into Twitter fights with something that's not going to help him.
Right.
And so Trump, we all heard what Trump said about Putin. We all knew what he meant when he said he was a genius. He meant that he was an evil genius, and that he had corralled him because he outsmarted Trump. And he said that Biden was dumb, and we knew what he meant. He wasn't happy that his president was dumb. He was angry. So what my point is, if DeSantis made that comparison, he would have said he's an evil genius.
Right.
And Biden is tragically dumb. And Trump just got to the point. But then on the other hand, would DeSantis have the fire in the belly that Trump does? I don't have an answer for that, but I do trust the primary system where they all get up on the stage, and all of us who thought Scott Walker was the dream governor.
Yeah.
He couldn't function on that stage.
Yeah.
That'll distill a lot of things.
We have a number of questions about Russia. So here's one from James. And if you were dropped into the presidency tomorrow, President Hanson, Governor Hanson, President Hanson,
Selma City Councilman, that's too much for me.
What measures would you take to deal with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the threat of Chinese militarism?
Yes. Well, to be fair, you have to say, what would I have done when they started massing troops in October? I would have believed that Putin was going to go in, because at that point we had lost all deterrence from Afghanistan, from begging them not to hack the way Biden had done, to begging Putin to pump oil, going back to the Obama reset years and the Hillary and the plastic button, and then the whole Biden and Burisma stuff. So we had lost deterrence. And so I think in October, we should have been rushing billions of dollars, not 500 javelins that Trump had sold, and which Biden really hadn't gotten bored, and Obama gave him none. We could have had 10,000 on that first day the Russians went in. We could have had 10,000 Stingers. We could have had sanctions that were calibrated. If you get on the border, we're going to have this sanction. If you go in, it goes up here. If you go in for 4 days, it goes, and have it all the way calibrated in advance to try to discourage them. And now what I'm worried about is that we have, well, this is kind of complicated. I'll try to be very quick, but they have 7,200 nukes. And, you know, it doesn't do any good to say, well, there are only 140 million people now. They've lost 140 million from the Soviet Union. They have a smaller economy than Canada or Australia, whatever. They're dangerous.
Right.
And they fight very well near or on their borders and inside, not very well when they're far away. But nevertheless, if I'm referring now, Jack, to some of the things I've been writing. Some people are writing they want to give them warthogs, give them our planes. Some of them, I think Elliot Cohen in the Atlantic this week said we need to go in there and shoot down their planes, Russian planes. That means we're going to get in a war with Russia. And what that would mean was, if American pilots, even in the age of woke, flew over and they were given rules of engagement, they would destroy the Russian Air Force. And Putin would go nuts at that, because that would destroy probably every fantasy agenda that he has. And there would be consequences of that. So I think that we can do the following: up the arms shipments, tighten down the sanctions. But I think we should have been giving them these sophisticated, heavy duty Patriot batteries. I know they have a lot of the latest models have a lot of sophisticated technology we didn't want the Russians to get, but they can shoot down planes well above the shoulder fired missile range, and that would stop a lot of it. But remember one thing: these planes that took out this base near the Polish border, they're shooting probably those missiles from Belarus.
Right.
So what good would it be once you say I'm in the no-fly zone, and the Russians are sort of like they're doing in the Korean War? They stay on their side, i.e. the communist Chinese side of the Yalu River. It's very hard to have hot pursuit to go get them, and they can shoot now.
Right.
Unlike 1950, they can shoot a missile into the space. So I would rather just keep pouring on the weapons. If we had the $80 billion we gave away to the Taliban,
right,
I don't think we're even close to giving that type of a support for Ukraine.
Or the cash we sent over in pallets to Iran.
Yeah, 400 million euros. Yeah, so we treat our friends much worse than we treat our enemies.
Victor, related to this, Richard asks, under what scenario does NATO declare war on Russia and mean it? I'll add to that. I mean, is there some way short of putting America at nuclear risk for that to happen?
Remember about NATO that NATO fights a lot of countries that have no Article 5 claims on its solidarity or allegiance. NATO went to Afghanistan. I mean, you know what I mean? There's nothing in the NATO charter that says if another country other than a member is attacked, you all have to go over there. But they did. And they went in to help non-NATO Bosnia. And so NATO has been an expeditionary force to do whatever it pleased.
Right.
And so it can go anywhere it wants. But if it goes in, it's been very careful not to. You see, my problem, Jack, is when people like Elliot Cohen write about a no-fly zone, or all these people talk about no-fly. I think Lindsey Graham, no-fly zone. Right. The history of no-fly zones have been a strong power telling a weak power, you can't go there. It's never been telling a very sophisticated nuclear power, Russia, you can't go there.
Right.
When you have two very powerful countries, there's no history of no-fly zones, because they know what that means. It's a full-fledged war.
Right.
And it's not like the Iraqi over Saddam's place. And they usually don't work very well. I mean, the Allies start fighting. No, it's my turn. No, it's your turn. No, I'm tired of this. That's what we did with Saddam. And the UN gets tired of it. So I don't think that no-fly zone's an answer. I think beefing up, sending the shipments, and making careful that NATO is not involved on Ukrainian soil or in the skies of Ukraine. Now, I think what the questioner is implying is, what if that missile had deliberately, on accident, on purpose, I didn't mean it, gone 30 miles into Poland,
right,
and taken it? Then what does NATO do? And Russia has essentially, does Russia then say, we're sorry?
Yeah.
This was missile week, by the way, Jack. This was... Last week was missile week, and by that I mean Iran shot 12 missiles into Erbil, ancient Arbela, that battlefield of Alexander the Great, and he said they were, he, meaning the theocratic government, said they were paying the Kurds back for helping the Israelis, or they were trying to get close to our consulate because of Soleimani. And then in January, North Korea sent more missiles, launched more missiles in 1 month than it had in any month in its history. And then we have Putin send this missile right next. All we're waiting for is another Chinese missile to go over the airspace of Taiwan. Why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Because somebody in the White House has not read 101 deterrence.
Mm-hmm.
I think the left feels that the more you feel somebody's pain, the more you're predictable, the more you're sober and judicious, the more your counterpart follows that script. It's never been that way in history.
Yeah.
If you are not unpredictable, if you're not quiet and go silent, or suddenly burst out with braggadocio, if you're not going to do that, then the enemy is going to do that. And
right.
So what Biden has been doing, Jack, is he's saying, well, no, not no-fly zone. We're not going to do this. 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 And Putin goes, well, what's he going to do? And it doesn't mean you do like Trump and said, my button's bigger than yours, or my nukes are bigger. But actually, it kind of worked. So you want somebody who telegraphs to the enemy, don't screw around with me, because I think all of us that went to kind of tough high schools, I won't mention his name because I see him still, but when I was 15, there was a guy about 5'6", and he was kind of the fastest boxer you'd ever seen. He just kept quiet. And there's this big guy that was picking on him. I thought, oh my God, Stevie Boy's going to unload. And he just said, you know what? If I lose my temper. He was a Mexican guy.
Yeah.
And this guy was a big football player. You're going to regret it.
Yeah.
And he unloaded on him. And as soon as he unloaded him, bang, 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 and the guy was on the ground. Then he grabbed his belt and he walked along the road to the high school, kicking him in the rear end like the guy was a dog, picking him up with his ball, kicking him with one foot, humiliating him. And that guy was traumatized after that. But my point was that Stevie was a very unpredictable person.
Yeah.
And he never said to the person who made fun of him, look, I'm not going to fight you.
Right.
I'm not going. And so you got to be unpredictable. You have to be very strong. You have to at times be very quiet and with a club and not. Biden's always, is it my imagination or the listeners and you, Jack, are you tired of the corn pop stories? Take Trump behind the woodshed and beat him up, slam the guy. Remember that made fun of Biden's sister's head on the counter?
Yeah.
It's always Mr. Tough Guy, and he's not tough.
Right. And as I've said on the podcast, and I'll show them, and I'll jam my rosary beads down your throat, which is something every nice Catholic
and
boy
then the
says.
Biden, remember I almost laughed the other day. We said the Biden word means something. I thought, no, it's Neil Kinnock's plagiarism that the Biden name is associated with.
Well,
anyway,
Victor, let's move on. I have a question here from Anthony. It was asked early on. I don't know if this is on topic. Of course, it's on topic. It's your opportunity to ask questions, folks. I'm interested in Victor. It's a miracle will happen. I'm interested in Victor's view of the social class aspects of the hysterical reactions to the trucker protests here in Canada. I have been personally shocked at the appetite for unleashing state violence on the part of our Laurentian, ruling class.
Well, put it this way. If those truckers had noodle arms like Antifa and they had hoodies and they had
cocoa,
nasal voices or pajama boy demeanor, then they could have burned it all down like they did for 120 days, $2 billion, 1,500 policemen, and nobody said a word. But because those guys fit a particular stereotype of losing North American lower middle class people, then that was fair game to suggest all sorts of things. And remember, there's this Peter Strzok, Lisa Page's vocabulary: smelly people in Walmart, Joe Biden, chumps, dregs, John McCain, the crazies are out, Barack
Crazy
Obama,
birds,
the clingers. What was the deplorables, irredeemables, the basket? How did they put it in the basket? They have a basket full of deplorables, like an Easter basket. I didn't understand that image.
You're getting religious again. Okay, let's see. On free speech, from Mike, there seems to be significant efforts to punish and crush speech that counteracts the MSM narrative. How does Victor see this battle for free speech playing out?
It's kind of ironic. I went to university when I was 17 in 1971, and all I heard from the left is, this is the free speech area at UC Santa Cruz. Or if I go up to the bookstores in Berkeley, this is the free speech, anything goes. And I was shocked at, when I hear professors use the F word, the S word. So that was what the left said, we're not going to ban Lady Chatterley's lover. You can, I was in a Latin class reading the Satyricon in Latin, and somebody said, I want you to know that the crazy religious right banned every translation of Petronius until 1960. Can you believe it? That's what I grew up on. Right. And now to see the left go full Soviet and ban what they call hate speech. And the other thing about this element is, you've created, I really do think this is connected, when you have coddled a whole generation, and at the same time, you've given them no initiative, responsibility, and they are not marrying, they're not having children, they're not buying homes. Right. We're down to 1.7 fertility rate from 2.1 just 20 years ago. These people are prolonged, just like Tocqueville said, they're prolonged adolescents, and they're very sensitive. And so they have microaggressions, they have hate speech. And, at some point, somebody is going to do that Apple commercial in 2004, where the woman runs in and throws the thing into the screen and bam, somebody's going to say, I don't give a blank. You're starting to see Trevor Noah and Bill Maher do that. And so I think I think when the questioner had a good point that it seemed that I was more frustrated or angry or more zealous. I think it's that I think all of us have to step up now and just say, you know what, take your best shot. I could
call me a racist. Yeah.
Call me a racist or a hate speech or a microaggressor. But, you know, I've been very lucky because I live out here in this farm. And when I go to the madness and the insanity of the coast, and I have about a 2-day limit. And then when I'm just about ready to go stark raving postal, I don't mean violent, but insane, I can come back and escape it all.
Yeah. No comment. So I have a question here from Gayla. I know Gayla. Oh gosh, I love you. How you? But she's expecting you, I think, to have a crystal ball here, either that or a magic 8-ball. Will the Durham investigation ever result in meaningful convictions and sentences? How do you think this is going, Victor? What's your gut telling you?
Well, again, there's 2 theories on it, isn't it? He's so meticulous and careful. He does not leak to the press. And is he sort of, you know, following the trail? He's going to finally be so ironclad, iron tight that he's going to have a lot, or is he just lost in the wilderness and in a labyrinth and doesn't know what the real issue is? I don't know. Sussman's not the real issue, but is he somebody? I think he thinks that ultimately the goal is to get these people, and we're already getting them with these Georgia Tech advisors, to come up and say, Glenn Simpson hired Christopher Steele, and they did so through the Perkins Coie law firm, who was hired GPS to Perkins Coie to the Democratic Party, Hillary. And somewhere along those lines, there will be a big enough fish that will be worth it, and he can indict them. It'd be nice to see somebody pay for all the misery they cause other people.
Victor, we were talking about it earlier before we went on. Jason, our great mutual friend,
yes,
writes, what do you think about the latest Tucker Carlson brouhaha over biological labs in Ukraine? The validity of Tucker's claims aside, mainstream media is deliberately ignoring the fact that he was reacting to recent congressional testimony by Victoria Nuland in response to a question by Marco Rubio. Victor, what do you make of this?
2 things going on there, Jack. One is that we had the Anthony Fauci. We have never had gain of function research. Don't look behind the curtain being the emails with the CDC director, that the 2 of them were panicking because they had privately routed 600,000 to EcoHealth that was doing gain of function with that lady. So Tucker is starting with the premise you can't believe people. And then he had, I think what set him off is in that testimony of Victoria Nuland, that was the simple question from Marco Rubio. Do we have labs or joint projects in Ukraine that are studying gain of function or something along that lines? And that's an open-ended question. So I thought she would either say, no, we don't. These are just what they were intended. They were just to dismantle and get rid of all these biological and nerve agents that the Soviet Union had. I was expecting that. Or then B, well, we got rid of them all, but then we thought that because they were there and Ukraine was an independent nation, maybe we could find out ways to, you know, combat them by keeping them around. But instead, she just got really nervous. You see her hands; she just turned pale, and she was a very frightened person. I think that set off a lot of people. And so I have no idea. I mean, Mitt Romney called Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, didn't he call her a traitor or
essentially, right?
This is a woman who was in the military, unlike the Romney family. I don't know if that matters, but if he's going to call somebody a traitor or treasonous and he didn't really quote what qualified as treasonous.
Right.
So, and even if, I mean, does anybody believe that the left ever feels that you cannot criticize U.S. policy? I mean, the left loved Fidel Castro. He and Che killed 20,000 people. They didn't say a word.
Right.
When I was in college, they loved Mao. They root for the Palestinians every time they're in a war with our ally Israel, but nobody says don't say that, you're a traitor.
Right.
So that was bad. I think what the issue is for Tucker, maybe for other people, some of them, not, I mean, if you listen to Jesse Waters and you listen to Hannity, you get one view of Putin and the war. And if you listen to Tucker and Laura, you get a slightly different one. But what's happening is there's so much culpability on the left, going back to reset, inviting Putin into the Middle East, the hot mic in Seoul, South Korea, South Korea, tell Vladimir that give me space, dismantling missiles. And then we go into, as I said, please don't hack since 16 infrastructure entities. Please pump oil, Mr. Putin. Oh, Nord Stream, no problem, Putin. Just pump sell all the oil to Germany. Oh, Afghanistan, take the stuff. There's so much appeasement of Russia and Russian interests that the left is dying to find a scapegoat. And they get very desperate. They'll say, well, he didn't go in during the Trump administration because he got everything from Trump. And we've talked that before. He got nothing. Right. Unless he wanted to get 200 mercenaries killed. So what the left is trying to do now is fixate on people on the conservative side and say, well, you're pro-Putin. Right. And if you're pro-Putin, then I'm exonerated from not selling them javelin weapons or giving them blankets or appeasing them. And I think it's very important for Tucker or for Laura to make clear. I think I know what their point of view is. They just need to make it clear that all of these considerations that they have about the biolab, Victoria Nuland, the Biden family, the appeasement, all of that is valid investigation. But when that SOB crossed in and started killing people, that could have been negotiated. He didn't want to negotiate anything, Putin. He took advantage of the fact that he saw a non-compos mentis president and we'd lost a turn. At that point, your first statement has to be, we got to get the SOB out of Ukraine. Whatever his justifications are, they don't warrant an election. And we did that pretty well in 1939 when Hitler went into Poland. Everybody said Stanley Baldwin didn't build enough Spitfires and Hurricanes, and Chamberlain went to Munich. And everybody said, yes, we empowered the tiger. But the tiger is a carnivore. And I have a piece today in Ultra where I kind of say, when the carnivore breaks out of the zoo, we don't say it's the tiger's fault entirely. We say, well, who was that stupid guy that left the latch open? Because a tiger will do what a tiger does. And I think that's what they have to say, that Putin is a tiger and he'll always eat somebody if you're naive enough to allow him to get out of his cage. And we did.
Victor, we have 8 minutes left, and I want folks to know when Victor says ultra, that means it's exclusive content at his at victorhanson.com.
Let's do a rapid fire so we get as many as we want.
How much of Biden's timidity could be explained by Russia compromat, such as Biden's family self-dealing or Hunter's laptop?
I think a lot of it is. I think there's going to be a lot there, but we won't find one iota till the Republicans take Congress. But I think when he was referred to as Mr. 10% or the big guy, where did all that money go? I mean, where did he get all the money for those beautiful homes he has? But that's something that we should worry about.
Interesting question from CJ about, it's a military question. Dr. Hanson, after reading the Second World Wars, the question remains in my mind. I understand the treaty between Japan and Stalin, but did the U.S. ever approach Stalin to establish an air base at Vladivostok? It certainly would have impacted the strategy of island hopping.
Well, we should have. There's a new book, out at Basic that really looks at our alliance in World War II in a very critical view. That April 1941 non-aggression was sort of payback. The Japanese, when they did the Molotov-Ribbentrop trap, were fighting the Russians, and all of a sudden, their German allies kind of sold them down the river and made a deal with Russia. So then they got back at them in April and said, okay, we'll have our own non-aggression and pact. And that was very important to the Germans because they were already planning on going into Russia, and they knew that Russia would not be worried about a Japanese attack from the east, and therefore could concentrate if Japan had not had that non-aggression. My father used to tell me when they were flying B-29s, they would see freighters headed toward Russia in the Pacific sometimes when they went to Australia or other places.
Right.
And they had their flags up, and they had no fear of Japanese submarines. So Japanese were killing us in Okinawa and Iwo Jima, and they were letting Russian ships go under that non-aggression pact. And they did nothing for us. We offered to have one-way B-17 and B-24 missions to help out Eastern Europeans. There was even talk among a few at the State Department, too few, that we could bomb the Auschwitz-Birkenau complex if the Russians would allow us to land, because it was too far. And they would not even allow a B-24, B-17 mission to land in occupied Eastern Europe and be fueled and go back to their base in England.
Okay.
And so they didn't want that. Yes
or no? This is from Brian. Does Trump win if he gets nominated?
Yeah, I think he does. I do.
Okay. This is from James. Here's a question from a friend, Major General Alexander DeMatteis, who's watching with me. Sir, did you read the 1,000-page document by Putin? Does it represent the same point of view as Hitler's Mein Kampf? Did you?
I read some of that. I don't. Putin has a lot of prejudices, but they're not as irrational as Hitler. Hitler, his ideology was counter to economic or military thinking, and he does a lot. I mean, Putin does a lot of stupid things, as we see going to Ukraine. But I mean, to rid the universities of Jewish physicists, as Hitler did, because of the crackpot idea that they were inferior when they were superior to German. So, I mean, what I'm getting at is that Putin's far more empirical, he doesn't have the resources that Hitler vis-a-vis the 1940s did in comparison now. I mean, I know he's nuclear and everything, but Hitler, remember at one point, a brief moment from April of 1941 until June 22nd of 41, he had all of the EU, all of it.
Right.
Today, almost all of it. And he had a lot of, with his ally, who had half of China. And by the time, they were stopped in late 1942, they had almost got most of the civilized world, except for Britain, the United States, and the British Commonwealth.
Victor from Dana, you're just going to have to yes or no this. Yeah. Would you have supported the Poles sending MiG-29s to Ukraine?
No, I probably wouldn't have. I thought.
Okay. All right.
I don't think they were going to. They have MiGs there until they're not all shot down, and I don't know how we would do that. I would rather get Patriots. They'd be far more effective, I think.
This is from Rush Babe 49. I know that you could speak an hour about this, but can Victor discuss Joe Biden's cognitive state? We have never before been ruled by a president, obviously in mid stages of dementia.
I'm not a doctor, but I know that Bandy Lee, the Yale psychiatric expert, and Ronnie Jackson, the president's own doctor, she demanded that Trump be put in a straitjacket and have an intervention. And Ronnie Jackson, who was the White House doctor, gave him the Montreal assessment, and he passed the cognitive assessment. So why don't we just cool everything and just say to Joe Biden, just take this test. We did it with Trump because the left said he was crazy and he would flunk it, and the right says you would flunk it. Just take it. He'll never take it.
Interesting question from David. What does Israel do about possible Iran nukes?
Oh, I'm afraid to answer that. I think Israel's going to have to act, and they're going to take them out. And Iran is not Syria, and it's not Iraq, which they took two reactors. It's a lot further away. It's bigger. It's more powerful, and Israel doesn't know exactly. Its nuclear proliferation project is much more advanced. So I worry about. I just wish that we had never spoken to them and left the Trump sanctions and bankrupt the SOBs. But I really worry for Israel, because I think they're going to get to a point where they have no choice. They're not going to have a third Holocaust, and they're not going to live under a sword of Damocles, a nuclear sword.
Victor, I know you get up at 3 a.m. or something like that, and godly 4, and you're reading. Let's just be the last question. A little advice. Where do you get your best news and information from? What are your sources? And I wonder if there are any offbeat ones that you rely on.
I do. I try to, first of all, get steely, and I look at New York Times very briefly, and I read Wall Street Journal. Then I go through what I call the lunatic blogs, Google News, Yahoo News. Every once in a while, I'll look at something like the Daily Beast, and that's like a shot of coffee to see what the left says. Then I really like Powerline. I go there first. That blog is very informative. I try to read polls. I read, of course, American Greatness. I look at, when you ask me if there's off-ball things, what would that, oddball things, maybe Zero Hedge, I look just for the fringe, or maybe even, I like Ace of Spades. I know he's really cruel to people, but whoever Ace is, I have a lot of admiration for his eccentricities.
You look at political betting websites too, don't you?
I do that, and I also look at certain YouTubes. I read the Fox News website. I try to do it for 2 hours. I usually between 4:30 and 6:30 in the morning, and then during the day I'll check on things.
You're a madman, Victor. You just.
I don't think
there's not enough hours in the day for the things you do. It's incredible. Scott, I don't know if you want to pipe up here.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you both. I just wanted to thank you both for doing this. It was fascinating, as I knew it would be. And I hope when I can bug you about it again in a couple of months or so, or maybe longer, they'll come back. Mention your podcast, please. That was one of the reasons I wanted to do this. So that you could plug
I'll mention
podcast.
3 things. The Victor Davis Hanson Show. It's not the Victor Davis Hanson podcast. Victor Davis Hanson Show.
He dances and sings on that one, right?
Yeah, and he mentions angels on it. You should visit victorhanson.com. And consider subscribing to that. It's $50 for a year. And Victor writes a lot of original material there. And for me, civilthoughts.com. I write a weekly email newsletter, free. It's like what I used to do at National Review, the Weekend Jolt. It's called Civil Thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, sign up.
And Jack, the Dying Citizen is not dead yet. It's still gasping. It's only been out 5 months. It's doing very well.
And you'll find a link for that on Victor's website. Yeah.
I should also point out that Victor Davis Hanson is the leader in the clubhouse of all the uncommon knowledges we've ever done, including the ones that preceded me, at I think 7.5 million views for the uncommon knowledge that we did on the case for Trump.
Are you trying to get me fired from Hoover?
No, like I could do that, first of all.
Hey, one last ad. Are you scheduling H.R. McMaster and I to talk about something? I saw that.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I am trying to do that. I was
embedded with him in Iraq, and
you guys did one about a year ago on Taiwan. Not on Taiwan. Sorry, you guys did one
that was that we had a little heat.
Yes, you got a little heat. That was a great one. I recommend that one. I'm thinking of another one that HR did for us on Taiwan, but the one that you and he did was fantastic.
I would get in the Humvee when we were going to Tajir or Fallujah, and I'd say, "Let me sit here." And he said, "Victor, when the thing gets blown up, this particular left rear seat with a steel plate is the last person to be blown up. So I want you to sit there."
Oh, well, that's a beautiful gesture.
It is. It was. He was one of the most courageous people I've ever seen.
Yes, he is. I love the
Arab Spring, and he would just walk in there with these guys with Saddam tattoos on their face, and they'd blown up a lot of people, and he didn't. He just walked right in and to sit down. He'd always say to me, "You stand over there. If the bomb goes off, it'll blow you out the door, but it won't blow you up." And so he was a really good.
And I recommend to everybody that episode of Uncommon Knowledge with Victor and HR, because it did get a little heated, but it was also fascinating because it's 2 guys who really respected each other and who were coming from different points of view. Also, HR will be on the Ricochet podcast this week. So
good. Say hello to him. Okay.
All right. Thank you both. Very much appreciate it.
It was wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank everybody.
Thanks, Victor.
Okay.
All right.
Take care. Thanks.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Peace.